So for the past decade, I'll just share my screen. I forgot about that. Okay, so I cannot share my screen at this point. Someone has to let me share my screen.
Sorry, you should be able to share now.
I can share. Let's see.
Is it working? There we go. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Okay. So for the past decade, Postdoc Appreciation Week has been a time to recognize the significant contributions that postdoctoral scholars have made to research and to discovery. Institutions from around the world participate by holding special events. At many institutions, PAW looks a little different this year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what hasn't changed is the importance of celebrating what postdocs bring to research, teaching, mentoring, service, and other critical aspects at universities, research labs, hospitals, government agencies, and industries across Canada and beyond. So to all of the postdocs out there, thank you for your enthusiasm, for your dedication to your work in whatever your discipline, for the creativity you bring to your research, your writing and teaching, for your patience and mentorship of others, and for your compassion and persistence, especially since March in what has been a very difficult period for early career researchers. We here at the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Scholars, l'Association Canadienne des Stagiaires Postdoctoraux, or CAPS, want to contribute to this week of celebrations. Two members of the Executive Council, Drs. Edris Madadian and Jennifer Major, have put together a fantastic lineup of webinars to bring Canadian postdocs together to discuss and learn about issues that are important to postdocs, such as writing successful grant applications, finding appropriate insurance, and sharing the results from the CAPS recent surveys. And they've sprinkled in some fun activities too. So I hope you will join us throughout this week. My name is Chris Gibb. As the chair of CAPS, I work with an incredible team of postdocs in all different disciplines, from social sciences and health sciences, physical, chemical, and computer sciences, and the natural sciences. We currently don't have anyone on the executive from the arts and the humanities. So if you work in this area, please reach out. We would benefit greatly from your experiences and from your insights. CAPS is an advocacy group comprised of Canadian postdocs with the mission of improving lives, training, and working conditions of postdocs in Canada and Canadian postdocs abroad. In the pursuit of this mission, CAPS carries out a range of activities and has been doing so since its inception over a decade ago. For example, CAPS actively collects data on the situation of postdocs in Canada for use in evidence-based reform in postdoctoral policy at national, provincial, and institutional levels. In 2020, we collected data in 3 different surveys. The first was the CAPS National Survey. The second, the CAPS Quick Response Survey on the initial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on Canadian postdocs. And the third one, which is currently underway, on the return to work during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I've just posted the links to the English and French versions of the survey. So if you haven't already done it, I would encourage you to do so. CAPS uses its data to inform the reports we produce, the editorials we write, the advocacy documents we submit to specific stakeholders, such as the Tri-Council agencies. And later today, Dr. Emma Griffiths will present a top 5 asks document that CAPS will be submitting to the Tri-Council agencies. It lays out, among other things, a trainee-focused COVID-19 recovery plan. The members of the CAPS executive also participate in meetings with a range of government, funding, university, and administrative stakeholders to speak on behalf of postdocs on issues including the internationalization of academia in Canada and a roadmap to recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, CAPS has hosted webinars and trainings for postdocs. It shares information about job and training opportunities, and it partners with organizations whose work also aims to improve the lives, training, and working conditions of postdocs. Over the course of the week, members of the CAPS Executive Committee will be presenting various of the CAPS endeavors and will further discuss CAPS activities and strategize advocacy efforts at the CAPS annual general meeting, which will be held on November 5th. So mark your calendars. For the remainder of these opening remarks, I want to share some of the highlights from the CAPS 2020 National Survey. With the generous support of the tri-capsule funding agencies, CIHR, NSERC, and SSHRC, CAPS commissioned Academica Group to conduct a survey on the experiences of postdocs. It's a follow-up to studies conducted in 2009, 2013, and 2016, and provides an updated profile of postdocs working in Canada and Canadians working internationally, as well as new information about working remotely, the employment status of postdocs, and postdocs' experiences with harassment. The survey was conducted online in English and in French from January 15th to April 20th, 2020. And the majority of our responses came in before mid-March when the pandemic really hit. 1,017 cases were retained for analysis. In 2020, the profile of an average Canadian postdoc is an individual who's between the ages of 30 and 34, is either married or in a common law relationship, and is at a stage in life when settling down, buying a house, starting a family, and saving for retirement is the norm. Postdocs are roughly 50-50 male and female. Respondents whose postdoc experience was outside of Canada were less likely to be female when compared with respondents with a Canadian postdoc experience. A significant majority of postdocs currently reside in Canada, about 87%. Of the remaining 13%, about half are in the US, 13% in the UK, 7% in Germany, and 7% in Switzerland. A higher proportion of women resided in Canada as compared to men. Of those respondents residing in Canada, about 38% live in Ontario, and there were significant minorities in Alberta, BC, and Quebec. Almost 3/5 of respondents reported having no dependents. Just over a fifth reported having children ages 5 and under, and 10% reported having kids ages 6 to 18. About 1 in 7 respondents reported having an adult dependent. And white respondents much more commonly have reported having no dependents as compared with Black, Indigenous, and people of color respondents. And only 4% of respondents self-identified as having a disability. One half of the respondents were Canadian citizens. A third were on work permits, and 15% were permanent residents or landed immigrants. Almost 2/5 of respondents were born in Canada, while the remaining 61% had origins elsewhere, mostly from the US, from India, and Iran. A third of current postdocs reported that their research discipline was biological sciences, 15% were in engineering, 13% in physical or chemical sciences. Engineering and physical chemical sciences are dominated mostly by men, while social and behavioral sciences are mostly women. Classification of position is a very important issue for postdocs. 2/3 of respondents reported they were employees of their institution. Almost 1 in 10 were employees of their supervisors. Respondents in Quebec were much more commonly classified as students than in other parts of the country. Respondents outside of Canada were more commonly classified as guest or visiting scholars, compared to respondents whose postdocs are based here in Canada. Over 4/5 of respondents overall reported that they desired to be classified as employees of their institution. This is because of benefits, salary, pay, and recognition for the work that they do. Almost 2/3 of respondents had held only one postdoc position during their career as a postdoc. 32% had held two. Postdocs in the sciences more commonly held two postdoc positions when compared with other postdocs. The average postdoc works between 40 to 49 hours per week. 2/3 of the respondents' time was spent on their own research, while 10% was spent on training other people. Postdocs outside of Canada spend significantly more time on their own research as compared to postdocs in Canada. Women spent a larger share of their time on administrative work and service compared to men. The most common postdoctoral salary range for current postdocs was $45,000 to $49,999 Canadian dollars per year, or $3,780 to $4,166 per month. Postdocs outside of Canada reported significantly higher salaries, and there's no significant difference in salary by race or by gender. Monthly living expenses varied considerably, but the most common response was $2,000 to $2,499. Postdocs outside of Canada were more likely to report higher living expenses as compared to postdocs in Canada. The median monthly household expenses range was higher for Indigenous respondents than for others. And not surprisingly, expenses were higher for postdocs with dependents. The most common benefits that current postdocs reported having access to were provincial health care, paid vacation, and dental insurance. Postdocs reported wanting housing subsidies, dental insurance, and vision care. Housing subsidy was most commonly mentioned by residents of Ontario. Looking at the individual institutions, it's clear that this is a significant concern for postdocs at institutions in Toronto and Vancouver. Current postdocs also noted that the current benefits are inadequate or completely lacking. A common complaint was the lack of benefits for grant-funded postdocs. Current postdocs reported being most satisfied with their relationship with their supervisor, and the aspect with which current postdocs reported being least satisfied was their preparation for non-tenure track job options. Black, Indigenous, and people of color respondents were more satisfied than white respondents with access to on-campus support services, but less satisfied when it came to salary. Almost 1 in 5 postdocs reported working remotely, and recall these data were collected before the onset of the pandemic for the most part. 11% work remotely while living in the same city as their institution. More women than men reported working remotely. Social sciences and humanities postdocs were the most likely to report working remotely when compared to other disciplines. Almost half of those who work remotely reported that this was due to improved efficiency and productivity, while 37% to work alone or from home. Only 15% reported that their position was designed for remote work. Respondents reiterated that working remotely can be lonely and isolating, and that supervisors and institutions need to remember to keep in touch with postdocs working remotely and to consider them when planning their programming and activities. Current postdocs reported most commonly completing training on research ethics, career development, and teaching, though in more than half of these cases, the training was not specifically designed for postdocs. French language training was the least reported training, with 41% saying that it was unavailable. The majority reported training was provided by the respondent's institution, and MyTax was also a frequent source of training, along with the local postdoc association or union. And the topics of most interest to postdocs are grant and proposal writing, which we'll be having this week, career development, and project management. So now moving into the longer term ambitions of postdocs. So among current postdocs in Canada, almost 2/3 reported that they planned on staying in Canada after their current position ends. Among those abroad, almost 3/4 reported that they plan to return. The most common reason for not staying or not returning to Canada was job opportunities, followed by personal reasons. Respondents bemoan the lack of opportunities in Canada and the better opportunities elsewhere. Current postdocs outside of Canada most frequently cited a specific supervisor, greater opportunities, and future career opportunities as their main reasons for pursuing a postdoc internationally. Working abroad as a postdoc does come with challenges, the most common of which included difficulty finding employment for a partner, transitioning to life in a new country, and financial hardship of living overseas. Among international postdocs who moved to Canada specifically for a postdoc, the most important considerations were future career opportunities, a specific supervisor or a project, and greater opportunities for research in their field. And not surprisingly, moving to Canada for a postdoc had its challenges too. Respondents reported visa and work permit issues, difficulty obtaining funding, and financial hardship as the most significant of these challenges. Respondents generally rated their postdoc very well in terms of preparing them for research and communication aspects of their career. Respondents were much less positive about the preparation their postdoc provided for teaching, with 39% rating this as poor or very poor. Almost 4/5 of postdocs go into their postdoc experience with the goal of a tenure track job. Among those whose goals have changed since they began their postdoc, the most common new career goals included industry and private sector research and public service. Among those whose goals did change, the most common reasons were family and personal issues, having less interest in academia, job opportunities, and more interest in industry positions. According to respondents, postdoc experiences do very little to prepare postdocs for non-academic career opportunities, with 43% saying that their postdoc did not expose or prepare them at all to non-academic jobs. About 77% said they were interested in having more information about non-academic job opportunities. Black, Indigenous, and people of color respondents were more commonly interested than white respondents in information about these non-academic opportunities. When rating their overall satisfaction, 73% of respondents were completely or somewhat satisfied with their postdoc training, while 67% were completely or somewhat satisfied with the value of their postdoc in advancing their career prospects. Postdocs outside of Canada were more likely to be completely satisfied with their postdoctoral training as compared to postdocs in Canada. Almost 4 out of 5 postdocs reported some form of mental health issue experienced during their postdoc. The most common was being overwhelmed by tasks, followed by loneliness and anxiety or panic attacks. And women were more likely to report these than men. Postdoc schedule and lack of available time represented the biggest barrier to seeking treatment for mental health, followed by lack of benefits and lack of knowledge regarding the options. Respondents recommended an increased focus on stress management for staff, faculty, and postdocs, free or subsidized services and support, along with better training and support for their supervisors to maintain positive mental health among trainees. Respondents elaborated that the mental health challenges of postdocs are reflective of the challenges of academia overall. For example, the inherent competition, job insecurity, and the pressure to publish. Being ignored or excluded from group activities was the most common form of harassment experienced by postdocs. Humiliating behavior was experienced by 1/5, and verbal and written abuse by 14%. Women were more likely to experience all forms of harassment, including unwanted sexual attention or sexual harassment when compared with men. Supervisors and peers were the most common sources of harassment. The most common basis for harassment was a postdoc's research field, followed closely by lack of experience or training. These were followed by personal characteristics such as gender identity, place of origin, age, and race. Women were more likely to experience harassment on the basis of their gender identity or expression, and Black, Indigenous, and persons of color respondents reported harassment on the basis of race and ethnicity much more commonly than white respondents. Most postdocs who experienced harassment did not report it. When they did, the most common person to whom they reported it was their supervisor. Of those who did not report the harassment they experienced, the most frequently cited reason for not doing so was the assumption that their experience was common or minor. Close to half of the respondents who did report the harassment said they were not satisfied with the outcome of reporting it, and only 15% indicated that they were satisfied. Respondents indicated that the priorities should be providing guidelines to postdocs regarding mechanisms for addressing workplace harassment, developing transparent and expedient procedures for addressing inappropriate workplace behavior, and providing guidelines about unacceptable workplace acts. Finally, respondents pointed to the need for more education, especially for supervisors, on the topic of workplace harassment. A similar number, about 31%, discussed the inherent structures in academia which makes harassment a pervasive problem, including but not limited to the power exercised by the supervisor over their postdoc. Postdocs may only have 1 or 2 opportunities to earn a reference that will get them a tenure track job. So there's enormous power in the hands of a supervisor who can very literally make or break a career. According to respondents, the biggest priority for CAPS in terms of advocacy should be higher salaries for postdocs, along with access to health and dental benefits, and the perceived disconnect between the number of postdocs and the lack of opportunities that require postdoctoral training. There were no significant regional differences in how respondents rated the listed priorities, although employee status and access to statutory employee benefits was more important for postdocs in Canada compared to those overseas. And when asked how they would overhaul the Canadian postdoctoral system, the most common response was greater salaries, and they also envisioned a system in which postdocs receive more support for careers that take them both within academia and beyond. So to sum up, many of the challenges facing postdocs in 2020, pre-pandemic, are the same ones that postdocs have faced in the past, as evidenced by CAPS's previous national surveys and other reports. There are challenges on earning a living wage, the lack of sufficient health benefits and protection and basic protection, finding jobs in a changing employment landscape, and navigating immigration policies and practices. These challenges have been exacerbated during the pandemic, and we'll get a closer look at the impacts on postdocs on Thursday's session with Dr. Nushin Nababi as she presents the results of the CAPS Quick Response COVID-19 survey. So on behalf of CAPS, I offer you a big welcome to Postdoc Appreciation Week 2020.
Yay! Thanks, Christine. That was fantastic. Does anybody on the line have any questions for Christine? If you do, either feel free to pop them in the chat or to unmute your mic and ask her yourself. Okay, well, I have a question to start things off. So, Christine, you mentioned that postdocs outside of Canada appear to be more satisfied with their postdoc and postdoctoral experience than those postdocs that are training inside of Canada. I'm just wondering if there were any more details or testimonials offered in the survey that might provide some sort of insights into why that might be.
So as you're aware, we're currently going through the long answers, the several hundred pages of long answers. So because postdocs had a lot to say for this particular survey. And one of the ideas that we're pursuing is that postdocs overseas tend to have more time to allocate to their own research projects as compared to researchers to postdoctoral fellows here in Canada.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the main reasons why postdocs go on to pursue postdoctoral fellowships, because they're passionate about research and learning more and doing so. But if they don't have those opportunities quite as much here in Canada as compared to the positions overseas, that could be one of the reasons why.
Right, right. So service appears to be a bigger component of a Canadian postdoc in Canada. And, you know, as you're saying, it's quite understandable that that can influence, you know, your experience. And I expect that, you know, once we are able to delve into those long answers a bit more, that we'll hopefully be able to explore that a bit more. Any other questions from the participants?
I just wanted to add another point onto that, because one of the parts that we added onto this year's survey was to break down the responses by gender and by, well, we tried to do race, so it was very post-analysis division of creating these racial categories in our answers. Um, and what's come up is that female postdocs tend to spend more time than male postdocs doing service and administrative work.
Mm,
So one of the interesting findings at this stage, there is no gender wage gap.
mm,
But if you look at the gender wage gap, even of assistant professors when they get started on the tenure track career trajectory, you do have that gender wage gap.
service
So
might
that's
be
something really interesting that we can bring through this survey is that you don't have the gender wage gap during the postdoc years. You do have it when you start on the tenure track ladder. And some of that may have to do with men postdocs being able to spend more time on their own research, on publishing more, as compared to women postdocs who are being pulled more to do administrative and service work that don't have the same kind of financial compensation and recognition.
Right, right. So this kind of data collection is really, you know, at this juncture is really perhaps starting to highlight some, you know, trajectory differences in terms of academic careers that maybe couldn't have been understood without, you know, this survey at this point.
Right.
So that, yeah, so that's really great to bring up. Thanks for bringing that up. You also just mentioned about exploring the role of ethnicity in the postdoctoral experience. Just slightly outside of the survey data, I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, you know, in light of the Black Lives Matter and Indigenous Lives Matter movements, you know, the importance of those movements. Has CAPS offered any associated resources for postdocs and for these movements?
So a couple of the members of the CAPS executive committee have been doing some research at their own institutions and finding different resources that are available for postdocs, mostly in Canada and the US, and we've posted those resources onto the CAPS website.
Great, fantastic. Any of the participants have any questions for Christine? Okay, I have one more quick question and then we'll move on because we do want to keep to time. So you mentioned a number of different surveys, particularly the 2020 National Postdoc Survey, the Quick Response COVID Survey, and the Back to Work Survey. So those represent three very different time points, a before, a during, the height of the pandemic, and then sort of returning to normal as much as possible. Does CAPS plan to synthesize the information from those three time points into some sort of report?
So absolutely, we don't have the exact time frame of when the synthesis will come out. The report for the quick response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the one that was the one where we captured data in April, May of 2020, that report is almost ready to be published. And Dr. Nushin Navabi will be presenting the results during the Thursday session. So check your schedules and stay tuned for that. So she'll be presenting the specific results
That's great.
of that one. And then the current return to work survey, I just put the links in the chat for English and French. So we're collecting data now on how postdocs are feeling about returning to their work sites. So we recognize that postdocs have been working during the pandemic, even though they're not necessarily in their usual work sites. And so we want to get a pulse of how postdocs are being included, excluded from these discussions. What are some of the considerations that they're taking, deciding where they're going to be working, how they're going to be working, if they're leaving academia altogether at this point.
Fantastic. Okay, so we have a comment in the chat. One suggestion as a postdoc, I think we should categorize them as independent researchers in terms of getting funding. And sometimes supervisors are busy and they don't do post, at least to right. Yeah, so that's, thanks Farina for mentioning that. That is a very fair point. Okay, so in light of time, thanks, Christine. That was fantastic. And we look forward to seeing the reports come out for all of those surveys in the near future. So, rolling right along, up next, we have a presentation from Dr. Amakrani. I'm sorry if I botched that, I probably did. And Dr. Anis Amakrani is a theoretical and experimental physicist with a PhD from the University of Strasbourg. He's developed a wide range of skills from engineering to project management through his various international experiences. He's also in charge of education and research policy within various associations, such as the Confederation of Young Researchers, the Association of PhD Candidates and PhDs of Alsace and Eurodoc, and he has a great knowledge of the politics and research of the doctoral world. He joined Adduct Talent Management in October 2017 to continue to contribute to research projects led by the Innovation and Studies Division and to share his knowledge during training courses. So without further ado, I'll hand over the mic, and please feel free to share your screen and start.
All right, thank you very much, Emma. Hello, everyone. So as Emma said, I'm Anis Amakrani. If you have any, yeah, you can see my screen, right? Just wanted to be sure.
Yes, we can.
Yes, if you have any question, don't hesitate actually to ask me, but I will leave about like 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the presentation for your questions. So I myself, I kind of quickly need actually to give a longer presentation about what brought me here actually and why I am presenting this to you. Basically, after or during my PhD, I was like very, very interested in what the PhD actually can bring you to the economical sector, to the world actually. Besides what research actually could bring to you. I'm a physicist, I'm experimental. I started actually as an experimental physicist. I switched actually also to the theoretical one. But meanwhile, actually, I was engaged in multiple organizations, multiple associations. I talked with a lot of people that kind of opened my eyes to the world actually that was behind the lab. And with that, actually, I had the ability or the possibility to share my knowledge, to share actually all my competency and to understand what the PhD actually is about. The PhD actually in 2020 is different actually from the PhD in 1950. So in 1950, when you had a PhD, you were ensured actually to be an academic. Today, you're not ensured to be an academic, you're not ensured to be anything. You have actually to dig your own way. However, what the PhD can bring you and what we kind of teach you all the time is that it brings you a lot of skills, side skills, that are besides the skills that you have in technical or scientific skills. So the thing is, when you're in front of any professional that didn't do a PhD, let's say, and you say actually that you have a PhD in physics, mathematics, literature, whatever, they will actually understand that you have technical skills, that you have scientific skills. So basically, you don't have actually to emphasize about that because it's already said with the comma PhD next to your name. What you have actually to talk about or to focus on is all the side skills. You have to think of your PhD as being a project, as actually a work that you have done during 3, 4, 5 years after the master's degree. Same thing actually that you have to do for the postdoc. And I know actually that most of you here are postdocs. So this is actually very important actually for you to understand. When you talk about your postdoc, try to avoid the term student. Don't say actually postdoc student, say actually postdoc researcher. You have actually to add or to emphasize the fact actually that you are doing professional experience. Without like further talking actually about this, but like going like a little bit deeper actually in the data, Adduct Talent Management, the company actually I am working with today, is the first firm actually that is specialized in the management of PhD's careers. We have 3 different activities, the recruitment activity, the training activity, and another activity which is innovation and studies, where actually I work. It's a hybrid team actually of multiple PhDs and not non-PhDs also and HR professionals. We have 3 main companies and a company that is associate in Strasbourg, and the 3 other ones are in Paris, Brussels, sorry, and Montreal. What is actually the heart of what we know or think we think is the best way for any professional to have a realistic career options is to find the intersection between what we call the 3 spheres. The sphere of your aspiration, your motivation, actually what motivates you actually to do whatever you're doing. Or anything. So you have actually to think about all the aspiration that drives you actually in whatever you're doing, the skills that you developed during this amount of time, that's actually your whole life, and the 3rd sphere, which is the job market, which has actually to be taken into consideration. I encountered actually multiple PhDs who were aware of their aspirations. They were really aware of the skills. However, they were struggling a lot finding a job because actually they didn't take the job market. They weren't interested in the job market. They weren't listening to the job market. And this is something, it's kind of a mistake actually to not know the job market as a professional. The thing actually about job market is that it evolves all the time. You cannot expect actually knowing it today and then go in next year or 2 years from now and apply for the same position. Things change, and also is the job market. So you have always to keep listening, even if you're not job hunting. So whether or not you want to stay in academia, whether or not you want to go away from academia, whether or not you want to stay in public or private sector, doesn't matter. Your role actually as a professional is to be aware of what is in the job market. And the intersection actually of these 3 spheres will clearly lead you to have the realistic career options. Going a little bit further actually with data, so we have multiple surveys that you can access, not only ours, but also surveys that you can find within the Canadian population, the American population, or European one. Honestly, they're not so different. Of course, there are some differences, cultural ones, that will lead actually to having different positions in different countries, but the tendency actually is kind of similar. So here are data that we got from the Board of Canada. And what we can see is that we have 40% of PhDs. So if we survey all the PhDs from 1 year after they got the PhD until the retirement, we have 40% of all the PhDs that are working in academia, this in Canada. In contrast, we have 60% of PhDs working outside of academia. So the jobs actually that you have inside of academia, I'm pretty sure everybody actually knows them. You have been working in academia for a long time. You clearly understand actually what we mean by postdoctoral researchers, by full or part-time college institutors, by university professors, and so on. However, the positions actually that are outside of academia are not that well understood or known actually by the PhDs or by actually you. The ones actually that we have here are categorized as management occupations, business, finance, administrations, natural applied sciences, health, education, art, culture, sales and services, and at the end we have trades, transport and equipment equipment operators. Sorry. So just be aware that among 10 researchers or 10 PhDs, 4 of them, roughly speaking, of course it's not like this obvious, roughly speaking, 4 of them are going to be academics by the end of their life and by the end of their professional career, sorry, and 6 of them actually will work outside of academia. When it comes to the job sectors, we have multiple or different actually job sectors. We have what we call teaching and research, so universities are all the companies that actually do research, only research, nothing else. You have IT sector, you have the consulting sector, which is a huge pool for PhDs. We have the production, the sport, health, communication, marketing, and top management. And of course, we have others that are not in this list of sectors. In parallel to these sectors, we have actually to separate research side? Are we working actually in research in academia, research and development in the private sector, or research and development outside of R&D actually, so no, not in research and development. And we say actually that we have the same amount of number, 40% of PhDs work as researchers in academia. However, for the other 60%, we have 37% working outside R&D. When people actually think that, okay, so you have been a researcher for 5, 6, or maybe 10 years, that actually means that you are going to be a researcher your whole life. Actually, it's not really the case. We have only 12% of PhDs working as R&D in the private sector. Keep also in mind that when you go outside of academia and you are a researcher, you are in this evolution actually, or work career evolution that leads you actually from going from being R&D researcher to someone else, actually to top manager or director or any other position in the company or in another company, which actually means that a researcher position or R&D position in or outside academia is an entry point to other positions in the in that same sector. Looking at what is the difference between the R&D sector and outside R&D, we have what is in association, non-profit organization, or NGOs. You have private, industrial, or commercial. You have public sector, and you have university. Of course, in the university, not everybody actually who did a PhD is a researcher. You have 40% who are doing research. You have also 12% who are working either as administratives, as technicians, as engineers, or any other position that requires a PhD at the university. In the public sector, so outside of academia or outside of university, you have 9% working R&D and 5% working outside research and development. When it comes to private, industrial, or commercial, you have more PhDs working outside research and development than inside research and development. So all of this actually just to highlight the fact that research and development or the life of a researcher is not the only outcome for PhD. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to be interested in other positions. So it's completely okay to say that you want to be a researcher your whole life, but it's also okay to keep aware of other positions. You might actually have a surprise. You might actually discover in the future that you are interested in other positions. You might also be interested later in something different that is not given to you by doing research and development. So basically, always be aware of all the positions that are offered to you. And you have multiple data, you have multiple surveys, you have multiple analyses that help you have a big picture of your situation. You shouldn't take these data as yours and say, okay, I'm among these 40%. You might actually be among these 40, 12, 9, or 5%. It doesn't really matter. You just have actually to see the tendency and to use these data as the data for the job market and try to find the intersection between that, your skills, and also your motivation. So basically you have to do three separate jobs and try to find what brings them kind of all together. In order actually to understand your position, or you can bring to companies, you have to think about how you are talking about yourself in front of any professional. Usually PhDs talk about their research, only their research, which is interesting, of course. However, when we are talking about, like when we are having an interview and we are talking actually professional to professional, we're not only interested in your research. So try to have another speech, try to have another version of your talk, which is talking about yourself. So talking about your research is fine. So try to focus about your results, try to focus about the methodology, but don't spend all the time actually that you have with the interviewer talking only about that. So try to switch somehow to yourself and say what you did, what did you acquire, what are your skills. Every recruiter is interested by the skills and the personality, which is also part of the skills of any individual. So think about your skills. But the thing is, skills have multiple definitions. And this is why it's necessary actually for me to introduce what is our definition of skills. So then we are on the same page when we present the rest of the data for this presentation. So what we define by skills are resources that any individual harness and combine to adequately address any professional situation. Like having a problem, how would you manage that problem? How would you solve it? What are the tools? What are the techniques that you are going to use in order to solve that problem? And this is actually what we call skills, is everything that you add or you use to harness or to bring together in order to address a specific professional situation. You have a lot of, or very often, you have skills that you are not aware of. And I'm saying that because we do a lot of surveys, we go a lot on trainings, and we have this interaction with PhDs, PhD candidates and postdocs as well. And we clearly actually see that there is a lack of awareness of your skills. So try to really think about that. I will give you like some tips on how you could do that. So you have skills that you are not aware of. You have skills that you don't know how to articulate or how to express to non-academic people. Of course, you're a researcher. Of course, you have your own technical words. You have your own way actually of saying things. But don't forget that the person who is in front of you is not always expert on your field or in your domain. So you have somehow to simplify your speech. However, don't oversimplify, otherwise they will take it bad because they will think actually that you think that they don't understand whatever you're saying. So keep it smart, but keep it simple. And you also have you have skills actually that you think are very common or unimportant or uninteresting to employers, so that you kind of avoid selling them, which actually is a very bad idea. I can give you the example of autonomy. Everybody, literally everybody in any interview would say actually that they're autonomous. However, it doesn't mean that you just have to stick out of the crowd and say, okay, I don't have autonomy. That's actually not what you should do. What you should do is say that you have autonomy and how you got that autonomy. So you have actually to explain, what do you mean by autonomy? So what do you mean by that skill? And how did you acquire it? So basically, me as a recruiter, I would see you and I would see actually exactly that you are autonomous. You didn't just check the box of autonomy and say, okay, so I am an autonomous person. You have you have a lot of skills that you develop during the research exercise. Just like one or two examples, take the literature or take the publication. If you just don't think about literature, think about publication, which is the activity that requires most of competencies in my knowledge. Publication requires analysis, requires curiosity, requires collaboration, requires time management, project management, collaboration, network, communication. So it requires a lot of competencies. One exercise that you could, and actually you should do, is to take any activity of your job that you're doing right now. You're in a postdoc, you are publishing, you are doing research, you are doing an experiment, you are gathering data, you're analyzing data, you're programming or whatever. Take that, set it as an activity, and inside that activity, make a list of all the competencies that you are putting for this activity, or you are acquiring with this activity. It's not that hard actually of a job or of a task to do. However, you have to do it just once, and you have to do it for all the activities, for all the jobs. And once you write it down, you kind of will remember it, and you will sell it much more easily or easier to any professional, any person actually who is in front of you. Think about this as an exercise or as an investment actually for your career. It will take you 5 minutes, 10 minutes to start it for one activity, and you'll have, let's say, 20 activities. So basically, it will take half a day or even a whole day to do that. But the thing is, you do it once, you start, and then once you have actually this document with all your activities, all your skills, you can complete it afterwards. You could add or remove any data in order to make it better, make it shorter, or to use this document to write your resume or to prepare your talk or speech or your pitch to any professional that you are going to meet in the future. To help you out, of course, remember that I said that you have skills that you're not aware of. To help you out, we did multiple surveys. So there is this survey of 2012 and this survey of 2018, where we asked PhDs to highlight the skills that they developed during the PhD and that are an added value for their profile. We gathered all of these skills, and we came up with what we call the core skills of PhDs. The core skills, actually, we believe that are the skills that are developed by all PhDs, by PhDs, regardless of their gender, of their nationality, of their citizenship, of their field of research, or anything actually that is linked to their profile. These competencies are the ones that you need really to highlight on. Use already these 31 competencies, add your own competencies. So these ones actually are common ones for PhDs, but you could clearly add the ones that are yours and make a list of all that and see actually how you could use that to explain any activity that you have done. This reference is from PhD Detective. You can find the report on the internet, just literally by typing PhD Detective project. You will have access to the report both in French and in English, and it's data that we gathered from surveying about 1,000, it's not here, for about 1,000 PhDs, PhD candidates, in order to see what are the added values of their PhD and what are their situation today. In comparison to the skills that you're having, it's good actually that I tell you what you're developing as skills, but is it also skills that are looked for by employers? So this is also something that we can show you now, but it's also something that you have to be listening to all the time. There are the top 5 skills that are most sought by employers in 2017. We have problem solving, adaptability, time management, organization, written and oral communications, and then collaboration. So these actually 6 skills are the skills that you need to be aware of whenever you think about any activity that you're doing today. So if you're doing an activity today, try to think, how are you developing or how are you using the problem solving one, the adaptability, the time management. This actually literally will help you to identify what are the skills that you are using. So that's pretty clear. The skills actually that you are not using that you should be using, and the skills that you might need to develop during this year because you are doing a postdoc now, but maybe you're not going to do a postdoc next year, and you cannot wait until next year to start developing new skills. So in order actually to develop that, you have to start right now, and you have to think about these aspects that will come up in the future. The objective clearly is to know or to be able to promote your skills. There is multiple techniques, but there is one favorite technique for us as a firm actually of consultants for HR, which is the STAR method: situation, task, action, and result. So whenever you talk about an activity like your work or activity of your job, think about it as this, let's start with situation. Who did what, where, and when? And then what was the task? So what were the goals? Try actually to sell me something that I didn't have or expecting. It's like when you write a script for a movie, you try to give an intrigue. So basically give the goals that you are expecting, the success criteria that you are going to have, the actions, what you did, why did you do it, or methodology, and then the results. So then you give me the results that you succeeded to do whatever you did with factual numbers, percentage, amounts. Try to be concise about that. We understand sometimes if you're doing fundamental research, it's hard actually to give or to quantify results. However, try to give or to get as close as possible to something quantifiable in order to show your interlocutors. you can find like multiple examples. My, let's say like favorite one is when you are talking about or applying for job posting, Research Associate, Conference Board of Canada. The job description says, work with a team to prepare research proposals. Second aspect, communicate effectively with team members, colleagues, research advisors, stakeholders, and actively contribute and participate in a dynamic and highly productive team. So you have to do a start statement about yourself, and also include what is highlighted here in bold, but bold. Here we see actually that we're talking about team members, team environment. So basically, you have to show up that you worked in a team. And then you have prepare research proposals, communication, contribution and participation in dynamic. So basically, these are the aspects that you need to show in every aspect of in any response for a position that you're applying for. It's not huge of a work. You start to do it like the first time it's going to be difficult, the second time maybe less, and then it's like something easy that you do. You really need actually to keep in mind that whenever you're applying for a position, you have to be concise, and you have to have one resume for one application. You cannot have like one resume for two applications. You're not at that stage anymore, so you have always to have a specific reply or specific answer for specific demand. So yeah, basically these are the main aspects that I want to talk about. Keep in mind that when you talk about your PhD, whenever you talk about your postdoc, no matter what you're applying for, academia or not academia, you have to show it or to say that it was a professional experience, because actually it was, or it is a professional experience. Whether you have a salary or not, it's still a work experience. So you have to show that you have professional experience in that specific field. One last thing that you could do is what we call the PDA, or professional development activity, something that you actually should do all the time. Reflection, motivation, aspiration about whatever drives you. Take stock of your skills, put your academic CV into a resume. Review current labor markets, keep track of the labor market all the time, engage in career exploration, go on LinkedIn, ResearchGate, Google, just like see actually what is the labor market, and at the end talk with other professionals. Don't hesitate actually to do that. And that was it. So yeah, I'm here if you have any question.
Wow, that was great. Thanks so much. It seems the STAR method, it seems pretty thorough. It also seems like it needs a lot of legwork. You have to do a lot of work to prepare, but I'm sure it's all very worth it. Do we have any questions from the participants on the line? Okay, so I have a few to start us off. First of all, thanks so much for such a great presentation. We, as CAPS, have been working with ADOC for a number of years now. I was just wondering, and if I missed it, I'm sorry, but could you just reiterate some of the training and the services that ADOC provides for postdocs?
Trainings that we provide for postdocs, what do you mean?
Do you offer any sessions where people can explore how to use the STAR protocol, I guess, or something like that?
Oh, yeah, yes, definitely. So we provide trainings. It's like one of the one of the activities that we have with ADOC trainings with the universities or labs or research organisms or any employers that would like to train their people to any specific activity. So STAR, for example, or how to apply or how to be efficient when you apply for a job, analysis of the job market, brand actually your image on the net, for example, to build your network, your online network, your physical network. All our trainings are mainly directed actually to how to develop yourself professionally, your skills, and how to promote actually your professional aspect, professional side or professional personality.
So do you have a certain number of trainings, or do you tailor the training to the needs of the group that you're talking to?
No, we do actually we do orient any training actually to the needs. Of course, if we cannot do any training, if it's literally actually that we cannot do it, or we're not like the good ones to do that. However, we have a catalog that you can find on our website that will list all the categories of trainings, and among that actually some trainings that are pretty fixed. And of course, if you have a specific need, we're always listening. Our objective is not to just do a training and go. Otherwise, we just record training and then put it online for the universities. But we are like always listening to the needs, specific needs, and we try to address these needs in order to bring you the most not exclusive, but the most personalized answer to the needs, to your needs.
Fantastic. So I'm just having a look in the chat, and we have a question, and I hope I summarized this properly. But the participant is wondering how the job market might be expected to change, or I guess I guess the job market is expected to change for postdocs coming to Canada with foreign work experience, I suppose, as opposed to postdocs that originate in Canada.
Yeah, definitely. The thing is, at the level of postdocs, when you are a PhD, you are a talent, you are a vector of innovation. So you shouldn't actually think by whether or not you did your PhD in Canada or outside of Canada. Think of you as a professional with specific expertise in specific field, in specific domain, with specific set of skills, and how you're going to bring that to the future employer that you're going to go to. Of course, you have to add the variable of I come from outside, come from abroad, or I did that abroad, so there are cultural differences. However, your skills, your expertise is something that is, specific to you, and you cannot do it differently. So you have just to highlight the fact that you did your PhD, you did your postdoc, or you did any specific professional experience there. And this is actually how I am going to highlight it. There isn't actually at this level, actually, when you're a researcher, postdoc or PhD, there isn't much differences actually between countries, to be honest. I mean, of course, there will be some, but it's not huge. So basically, just think of yourself as PhD, as a provider of solutions, never as a job seeker, as a vector of innovation, and let the magic happen, I would say, actually, because you have actually to adapt to the needs of wherever you're going to.
I really like that, thinking of yourself as a solutions provider rather than a job seeker. That's really inspirational. Okay, we have another question in the chat. Right, sometimes job seekers find it difficult to convince employers that a PhD is work experience.
Yes.
Do you have any advice?
Yeah, of course. So it's pretty common. It's not sometimes, honestly. The thing is, let me just start by saying that it's the job of every PhD to say or to highlight the fact that when you do a PhD, when you do a postdoc, it's work experience. And the second one is when you have a professional in front of you who cannot understand or don't really know actually what is a PhD or what do you do in research, and think that you're still going to school, you're still having exams and not doing any work. Just highlight the fact that you worked on a specific project, you managed the project, you managed the team, you managed funds, you applied for grants, you had interns, you had a methodology for a specific problem that you worked on in collaboration with other collaborators. So basically use the vocabulary that we use in the professional sector and highlight all that in your research. And basically with that, nobody actually could tell you that it's not a job, because what would you define actually as a job? It's not just that you sign a contract or you have salary. A job is you have a problem, you are in charge to solve that problem yourself, or with the team using specific tools. And if you can highlight that you did that during the PhD, or it's not if you can, you will be able to do that, then you can literally convince. And if you cannot convince that person with using these tools, I think you don't really want to work for them. It's just advice.
Yeah, excellent advice. That's great. Thanks for that. I have one more question. So you mentioned in your talk about how, you know, a person's a PhD's career trajectory can change throughout the course of their life. I was just wondering if you have any advice about what postdocs should do, how to train for a resilient career.
So every PhD, like not PhD candidates or anything, it's just anybody actually who had a PhD have a unique career. You cannot find actually, to my knowledge, you cannot find actually two PhDs who had the exact same career, except the linearity, you know, where you become a professor at the academia. But if you leave academia, then you have like a wide range of possibilities, so much actually that you cannot find two people doing the same thing. What you can do is just have a look at the tendencies. So basically have an objective. Try to see a light somewhere in the future in 5, 10, or even like 15 years from now, and say or ask yourself, where do I want to be? If I want to be like in this direction, you don't have actually to have specific position in a specific company. You just like want to have specific tasks. You want to work in specific environments. You want to work with specific tools or with specific people. This gives you like an environment that you want to go to. And when you have this environment, you can analyze that environment. Once actually you do the mind mapping, you analyze that environment and you see actually what you need to reach to that environment. And then you do your retro planning and see, okay, if I want to do that, I have to go through this, I have to do this, I have to do a second postdoc, I have to work with this company to acquire this competency and go to another company and so on. It's not a huge, actually, it's not a huge work. It's very easy work. What is huge, what is kind of difficult, is to have this projection of 15 years. It might be difficult, but I guess you are at the level where you can make decisions and you can analyze pros and cons of every decision. So you could just, you know, project yourself in the ideal situation of 15 years and try to map or to find the right path or the best path. There isn't like one right path, there is the best path to get there. And don't be afraid to switch from one sector to another, and don't be afraid actually to make mistakes, because it's okay to make mistakes. You can always like go back anytime.
Right, right. So what we recommend is for everyone to take an ad hoc training session so that they can walk you through the steps of doing the mind mapping for your career, for creating and developing a really effective CV, resume, all of the tools that you need to go out there and show off all of your skills and your talents to get a job. So in the interest of time, I'm going to ask if there is one more burning question from the participants on the line. Last call for questions. All right, I want to thank you, Anis, for a fabulous presentation. This has been extremely informative. We can find all of the training sessions and all of the information that you mentioned today on the ad hoc website, right?
Of course, you can just go to the catalog, and if there is something that interests you and is in the scope that you can see in the catalog, you can always ask us, and we can see together what suits you best and what suits us also best.
Fantastic. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone. Join me in giving a round of applause for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So get yourselves a cup of coffee, take a bio break, and we will adjourn. Well, I guess we'll make it maybe an 8-minute break. And we will meet back here at 11:25 Pacific and 2:25 Eastern Standard Time for the rest of today's session, which will be all about the top 5 asks that CAPS has for the Tri-Council. So thanks to all the participants who have been watching and asking questions, and we'll meet back at 11:25. Thanks a lot, everybody. All right, hello, welcome back everybody. Welcome to the second half of today's session. I'm just gonna share my screen. Hopefully you can all see the slides. One moment. Okay, so first of all, I want to wish everybody a happy Postdoc Appreciation Week. As Christine alluded to earlier in the session today, this is an annual event that happens around the 3rd or 4th week of September every year. And Postdoc Appreciation Week is celebrated all across the world. And we, CAPS, are hosting a number of really exciting and interesting events all throughout the week to really help to celebrate and put postdocs on the map. So you can see the schedule at a glance here. It's probably a little hard for you to see, but I encourage you to go to social media, go to the website, take a look, check things out, and to attend as many of these sessions as possible. We also really encourage you to share what's happening at institutions and within postdoc associations across Canada. We really want to hear your stories. We want to see your pictures. So feel free to share those with us. And also, we are hosting a competition during PAW. We're looking for postdocs to share with us stories of success and resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you had some kind of success or something good has happened, we're always looking for good news. Please share us your story in 300 words or less. You can send it to careerdev@caps-acsp.ca by this Thursday, by September 24th, and you could win $100. So there's a number of different prizes that are available, so please get your stories in. We really look forward to seeing them. So before I begin, I'd just like to quickly acknowledge that I live and work on the unceded ancestral traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And I'd like to thank them for hosting me as I present today's topic, the CAPS Top 5 Asks for the Tri-Council of Canadian Research Funding Agencies. So my name is Emma Griffiths. I'm a past chair. I am the past chair of CAPS. I've been involved with CAPS since about 2016. And before that, I helped to co-found the Simon Fraser University Postdoc Association. So I've been involved with advocacy for postdocs for a long time. And so with that, I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. So for the benefit of those who are just joining in or those who are rather unfamiliar with the world of postdocing, I thought it would be useful to just reiterate some of what Christine was saying at the beginning of the session today, and to define what a postdoc is and what they do. Now, this is not necessarily an easy thing to do because postdocs or a postdoc position, a postdoc's experience is not necessarily the same across the board. It's not the same for each person. And this was actually discussed in Anis's ad hoc presentation just before the break as well. But for the purposes of having everybody on board, sorry, let me just take one quick minute to see if there are people that are waiting to enter. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, so what are postdocs? So postdoctoral researchers, or postdocs, are individuals that hold a completed doctoral degree, or a PhD, or a medical professional equivalent, like an MD, that are involved in a temporary period of mentored research or advanced training. And this training is often linked to a university or an affiliated institution, sometimes to industry or a government research lab. And postdocs play a number of different roles in research and also in educational settings. And they carry out a very wide variety of duties. For example, conceiving and performing basic and applied research, writing large portions, if not entire grants, grant reporting, project management, lab management, administrative tasks, such as sitting on hiring committees, leading collaborations, authoring manuscripts on their work, but also helping to author manuscripts about their mentees' work, peer review of manuscripts, teaching classes, supervising and mentoring grad students and undergrad students, presenting at conferences, and doing many other aspects of service work. And this is just to name a few of the things that we do. So we are involved in all aspects of research, all aspects of the lab, all aspects of teaching. And so we are very critical components of the academic spectrum. So the mission of the Canadian Association of Postdoctoral Scholars is improving the lives, the training, and the working conditions of postdocs in Canada, but not just in Canada, also Canadian postdocs training abroad. So we're really interested in things like, can our postdocs get jobs? Are they healthy? Are they safe? Are they happy? Are they treated fairly? And if not, we're interested in finding out why not. So to fulfill our mandate, CAPS, one of the primary activities of CAPS is to perform data collection. And this is so that we can perform evidence-based advocacy. And as Christine has very nicely described earlier this morning, or this afternoon, CAPS has been collecting data about postdocs for over 10 years now, using surveys and putting together different kinds of reports to reveal the challenges and basically the situation for postdocs in Canada. And I've just provided a number of different reports that make for really good reading just at the bottom of the slide here. And I encourage everybody to take a look at these reports. They're available on our website. They're very thorough. They have a lot of recommendations. And they basically describe the challenges for postdocs in Canada that pertain to the difficulty of earning a living wage, the constant lack of sufficient health benefits and basic protections like EI and CPP, the difficulties that postdocs have finding jobs in a changing employment landscape, the difficulties we have navigating inconsistent immigration policies and practices, among many other challenges. So please do check out the publications and resources page on our website for a lot more information on the data that we have collected over the years, which includes, as Christine mentioned earlier today, our 2009, 2013, 2016, and our upcoming 2020 National Postdoc Survey. That will also include the COVID-19 surveys that Christine mentioned as well. So CAPS has a long-standing relationship with Canada's Tri-Council of federal research funding agencies, which consist of the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, or otherwise known as CIHR, the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council, known as NSERC, and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, known as SSHRC. Now, the Tri-Council has supported CAPS initiatives like the data collection activities and dissemination activities that we just mentioned. They've also supported our annual general meetings. They've generally supported us financially, administratively, and politically since CAPS's inception and formation in 2008. And it really is this allyship, this partnership, that's one of the most fundamental to CAPS's advocacy. So, oh, and I should just go back, and I'd just like to say a very deep and grateful thank you to the Tri-Council for their past and continuing support. We couldn't have done pretty much any of the things that we have done without you, so thank you for that. So the impetus for the session today comes from our annual general meeting that was held in Halifax last year in November 2019. So there were there were several Tri-Council reps in attendance, and after the AGM, they came to us and asked us to develop a list of top 5 asks in order to really articulate how the Tri-Council could best support postdocs going forward. And so this became a really critical activity for us, and a high priority activity for us. And so the idea is that we would formulate these top 5 asks as a report based on the results of our surveys, past recommendations that were made in different publications, and through our regular consultations with postdocs and postdoctoral associations and postdoc unions. So the plan was to draft a plan and to workshop it with our fellow postdocs, and then to send the draft to the Tri-Council, who would prepare a response and present that at our AGM in November. And this is just a little reminder for me to tell you to make sure to check your calendars in November, because our AGM will be virtual this year and open to everyone who's interested in participating. So please do tune in, because there will be some further developments. So in November of 2019, we set about writing a document to summarize and prioritize and develop this list of top 5 asks. And then came COVID-19 in March of 2020. And this considerably changed the landscape. So I'm sure, as you know, COVID-19 is what people are calling a once-in-a-century event. And it's putting pressure on universities and research institutes like never before, with the majority of universities and post-secondary institutions closing down or going virtual. And researchers en masse have been transitioning to working from home. And this has caused a slowing down of research. It's completely changed the teaching landscape. There's been a closing of workspaces like labs and classrooms and conference venues and field sites. And all of this has had many repercussions on postdocs. So to help postdocs deal with these different situations and these different challenges, CAPS has created a COVID-19 research hub on our website, or sorry, resource hub on our website. So please, I also encourage everyone, whether you are in need of help or not, to go and check out the resource hub and to make sure that all of your networks are aware of it, because there's some very valuable information there. In addition to the resource hub, we've also worked to better understand, engage the impacts of the pandemic on postdocs. And so, as Christine mentioned earlier this morning, CAPS performed a national impact survey at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm sure it will come no surprise to all of you that the results of the survey reveal that the cracks that already existed in the postdoctoral training system have widened. So the survey was carried out, as Christine mentioned, in April and May of this year. We had almost 400 respondents from across the country involved in different research environments respond. And basically the results of the survey indicated that existing challenges were not only aggravated, but there were additional negative financial, mental health, and career impacts that postdocs were dealing with, such as the reduced productivity due to complicated work logistics, for example, the shifting to remote working and working from home, reduced research-related travel and dissemination and networking opportunities. There were issues with work permit and immigration delays. There was job application interruptions and losses. There was fellowship interruptions and losses. Many postdocs felt that they were insufficiently insured to deal with this emergency situation. And there was also many more impacts revealed. Now, it's important to recognize that COVID-19 impacts the entire academic and research community. But for postdocs, these impacts are magnified because they're at a very vulnerable position in their faculty career trajectory. They have to accumulate maximal academic capital per unit time. So as opposed to early career researchers or grad students who generally have a longer tenure than postdocs, you know, a postdoc can be a year, 2 years, it can be longer, but they're generally supposed to be short, and you have to demonstrate extraordinary productivity in that short amount of time. So the impacts of a challenging postdoctoral training system that's aggravated by a global pandemic really do have unique impacts on postdocs. And we sort of touched on this in a position piece that we published in the in a series that was published by the Canadian Science Policy Centre. So we encourage you to take a look at that work as well. So this introduction is all leading up to the fact that the top 5 asks that we would have written 6 months ago would have focused on recalibrating the postdoc training system. But in this wartime emergency pandemic research landscape, we really need to focus on preventing as many postdocs as possible from falling through these widened cracks. So we see that, that the development and implementation of a trainee-based recovery plan be the top priority for a for the Tri-Council. And the rest of this discussion will be on elaborating on what we see that recovery plan looking like. So a point we wanted to emphasize was that this trainee-based recovery plan shouldn't just consider the impacts on research productivity, but rather should be more holistic in its scope and incorporate mitigation strategies for the broader and longer term impacts, which includes mitigating the wait and see attitudes of institutions. So for example, institutions, we hear very often say, well, let's see what the other institutions are doing first before we do anything. Or let's see how this pans out before we make any big changes. And it's this wait and see attitude which really affects the benefits and services such as health insurance and mental health services, as well as interruptions and delays to work permits and immigration applications. So we are asking the Tri-Council to be broader in their scope and not just look at research outcomes. So we cannot stress enough the importance and influence of the Tri-Council in putting forth recommendations to improve the situation for postdocs in Canada, both during peacetime and wartime. The granting agencies determine policies regarding the dispersal of funds, so prescribing the value of funding packages, but also outlining the responsibilities of postdocs and supervisors and institutions. Therefore, as decision makers, and granting agencies have an opportunity to play an absolutely crucial role in advancing recommendations for improving the postdoctoral landscape in Canada. So now we're getting to the meat of things. As I said, we have tried to put together and prioritize quick-ish things that the Tri-Council can do as part of a trainee-based recovery plan. I have to clarify that this is a draft right now. So I know we have some of the Tri-Council reps sitting in right now. This is a draft. We plan to keep the comment period on this draft open for 2 weeks before we submit it officially to the Tri-Council for a response. But for today, we'll go through the draft and we'll see if anybody has anything to say in the chat. Okay, so the top 5 asks that we prioritize for a COVID-19 recovery plan is the stop the clock for postdoctoral fellowship applications, recognizing that postdocs are evolving early career researchers. This stop the clock is already in effect for ECRs, and so we think that this should be extended for postdocs as well. Point number 2, we think that there should be an automatic 1-year extension of fellowships, and this is to buffer against financial impacts and administrative interruptions to work permits and benefit plans. But that 1-year extension should have an opt-out option if it's not actually beneficial for the postdoc. Point number 3 is that the Tri-Council should provide clear criteria for reviewers to account for COVID-19 interruptions and to better enable feedback in fellowship reviews. Point number 4 is that we ask that the Tri-Council create new funding opportunities for senior postdocs that would be transitioning to faculty positions but may be critically impacted by this national shift to COVID-19 research priorities. Point number 5, we ask that the Tri-Council ensure that external postdocs are eligible for institutional benefits, which include basic protections like EI and CPP without a stipend reduction. As we learned in our COVID-19 survey, and as I already mentioned, we know that postdocs have been hard hit and have been ill insured. And so this would be a big step forward. So those are our top 5 COVID asks. But we recognize that these top 5 asks are actually part of a larger roadmap for improving the postdoctoral system in Canada. So these COVID asks are part of a larger, a broader scope top 5 asks, which I'm going to discuss now. So the top 5 COVID asks, generally speaking, fit nicely and dovetail into our broader top 5 asks, which really focus on improving the postdoc system in Canada. So our big picture top 5 asks would be to design and implement a trainee-focused COVID-19 recovery plan that we've already detailed, to support a living wage for postdocs in Canada and Canadian postdocs abroad, to adjust funding strategies to support the full spectrum of postdocs. So, you know, you can have postdocs that are fresh out of PhDs, you can have postdocs that have been postdocing for 6 or 7 years, and they are, you know, functionally speaking, pretty much early career researchers. So how you support those 2 different groups and the spectrum of postdocs in between, there shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. Point number 4, to recognize the academic capital of postdocs with proper attribution of their contributions. So for example, a lot of times postdocs will write large parts of grants. They're not allowed to be primary applicants, and often they are not even attributed. There's no even credit for their work in those proposals. And that really impacts their track record. So, and it's, it creates dissatisfaction. Point number 5, to ensure award holders are eligible for institutional benefits. So now I'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into each of these points. So in terms of designing and implementing the trainee-focused recovery plan, we've already discussed that a little bit. So we've already discussed the stop the clock and the automatic 1-year extensions. But we would also like to see the successes of postdocs be recognized. For example, if you were invited to present at a conference, or you won a position to present at a conference, you should be allowed to include that in your CV and in fellowship applications, despite the fact that maybe the conference was canceled because of COVID, or you were unable to attend because of restrictions. We also suggest that the duration of fellowships, because in light of all of the different kinds of interruptions, we ask that the Tri-Council extend the duration of fellowships, particularly for SSHRC and NSERC, to 3 years, and to 4 years for CIHR. And this is as per the Naylor report. So this is a scientific review that came out a few years ago now by different, and supported by a number of different Canadian scientists. We also ask that the Tri-Council increase the eligibility period for postdocs to apply for fellowships. So understanding now that the job market is even tougher and that research funds are being increasingly diverted to COVID-19 priorities, postdocs will need longer and more support to transition to faculty positions. And so we ask that the Tri-Council extend those eligibility periods. I think right now you can apply for a fellowship. This may be slightly different in different cases, but for me, for example, you could apply within the first 2 years of completing your PhD. So we're asking for those eligibility periods to be extended. And we are, as we mentioned already, please provide clearer criteria for reviewers to account for COVID-19 interruptions. So we won't dwell on that. The next point is for the Tri-Council to help better support a living wage for postdocs. So we ask that, we've seen that it's possible for two postdocs of equal caliber to sit beside each other in the same lab doing similar work. And while one postdoc enjoys a much higher salary than the other, or two postdocs can work at different sides of the country and they can earn the same salary, but they can experience very different standards of living. And so we ask, you know, what we'd like to know from the Tri-Council, is it better, you know, do they see more value in increasing the prestige of individual awards, or do they see more value in widely supporting research excellence in Canada across the board? And if it's the latter, we see a more equitable and impactful distribution of funding would help with that. And that would incorporate increasing the number of fellowships. So maintaining a success rate at 25%. So there's more people getting more money, and there's fewer people with really, really prestigious awards. And we, you know, it's very important to support our international postdocs. So of those successful applications, we are also advocating that 20% of those be allocated to international postdocs. We also advocate for increasing all of the values of those fellowships as much as possible, except for the banting, to reflect, to bring up average salaries across the board. As Christine mentioned, the average salary, the median salary for postdocs was around $45,000, and those postdocs are at a position in their lives where they are supporting families, supporting dependents, they have mortgages, they're starting to pay into retirement plans. So, you know, salary becomes much more important. So to better support postdocs, we recommend that average salaries be $50,000 a year, with increase depending on how many years of additional training those postdocs have had. And we also ask that externally held awards better reflect currency exchange rates. And then also to recognize the systemic disadvantages of postdocs that identify as people of color. In Canada, we ask that the Tri-Council prioritize support to mitigate these disadvantages. So for example, Indigenous postdocs are often from remote communities, and they have more extensive familial networks. And so funding to support travel independence should be also formulated into fellowships and stipends. The next point is to adjust funding to support the full spectrum of postdocs across Canada. So as I mentioned, postdocs differ widely in their experience and their duties. And so they require different levels of support. So for example, you can have a senior postdoc that may effectively run a lab and operate as a PI. They write grants, they supervise students, they manage multiple projects, versus a new postdoc with less experience that focuses mostly on their own project. So to better support the spectrum of postdocs in Canada, we ask that the Tri-Council create new funding opportunities for senior postdocs to support those who are in the process of transitioning to faculty positions, recognizing that postdocs are postdocing for longer and longer because of the job market. We also ask that the Tri-Council establish a pool of smaller awards for trainees to support professional development and career transitions for PhDs and postdocs that are moving out of tenure track careers. So we basically need more support for senior postdocs that are transitioning to faculty positions, and then smaller pools of awards to enable postdocs that aren't going to end up with faculty positions to be able to more effectively transition out. We are asking the Tri-Council to recognize the academic capital of postdocs by giving them credit for all the work that they do. So this is really important because, as I mentioned, it can be a big source of dissatisfaction for postdocs when they aren't recognized properly for everything that they do. So as I just said, postdocs often perform a wide variety of services for which they do not receive credit by their institutions, sometimes their PIs, and sometimes the Tri-Council. And this lack of recognition impacts establishing official track records used to apply for grants as ECRs. So to mitigate this, we ask that the Tri-Council officially recognize postdoc contributions to grant proposals. So one way of doing that is to enable postdocs to include successful proposals in their future grant applications by changing policy and eligibility criteria, enabling senior postdocs to act as primary applicants on grants, and creating opportunities for mini grants so that senior postdocs can conduct independent research of their own and take credit for that. And finally, as we have already discussed, we ask the Tri-Council to ensure award holders are eligible for institutional benefits. So in our COVID survey, only 59% of postdocs felt that their insurance needs were met. And we feel that it's very important to harmonize access to statutory benefits for all postdocs so that externally funded postdocs are no longer penalized for their success. Okay, so in summary, because I'm really interested to get feedback from these thoughts, our top 5 asks, our top 5 COVID asks should work towards a holistic trainee-based recovery plan. But we would like to stress that these asks are part of a larger roadmap to improve the postdoctoral system in Canada. And we'd like to also reiterate that the granting agencies have unparalleled influence in advancing these recommendations. So we are really pleased to have them here today to listen and to take our recommendations seriously and to continue to work with us into the future to help solve a number of these difficult problems. So all of you who are on the line, you can find the draft report at the link that is listed here. As I said, we'll have the comment period open for postdocs, postdoc unions, postdoctoral associations for 2 weeks. We will take all of those comments and synthesize those into our official top 5 asks, and we'll be submitting that shortly after that the comment period closes. So I'd just like to take a moment to again acknowledge the absolute critical support from CIHR and CIRC and SHRC over the years. To all of the different postdocs and postdoctoral associations and unions that have consulted with us and worked with us over the years. The past CAPS exec for all of the legwork, without which none of this would be possible. And thank you all for listening. You are incredibly important to us. We want to hear from you. We want to know things that are going on, the challenges that you're facing. So please do, send us messages. We appreciate all of the feedback that we get, and we will especially appreciate all of the comments on this document. So once again, you can find the draft report at the link listed here, and we will make this link available on social media and on the website. So we encourage you to share this among your networks as well. So with that, I'm open for questions, and please let's begin a discussion. All right, any
Can I start, Emma?
Hello? Yeah.
Hi, well, thank you very much for this fantastic talk. It's really inspiring. My name is Kutu Bakawi, and I'm the Vice Chair External at CAPS. I'm really happy to meet all of you today, and I just want to ask whether you can comment on how applicable is including a statement that postdocs can apply for mini or small grants from the Tri-Councils as part of the top 5 asks.
Do you mean you want us to bring in the mini grants into the COVID top 5 asks?
Not necessarily the COVID top 5 ask, which is just the part of the plan. Mm-hmm. You already mentioned that we will be asking whether postdoc can be recognized as co-applicants.
Right.
on grants, or whether they can list their successful grants or the grant that they contribute to in their future applications. I was just wondering how applicable is postdoc applying for small grants from the tri-councils.
Right. I think it's incredibly important. And it was something that we were discussing at the AGM last year. The ability for a postdoc to get $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 and be able to demonstrate that they are capable of managing those funds, investing it in materials and research processes, and to be able to produce deliverables and outcomes, I think really demonstrates leadership. It's almost like an internship of managing grants. It will contribute, I think, greatly to building up a track record that will be able to better place postdocs for getting what are probably going to be even more competitive grants and fellowships down the road. So I think that these mini grants, and they don't have to be big. I mean, there's lots of different projects out there that can be funded by different pots of money. I think that would be an incredible opportunity for postdocs and an incredible help. So, okay, somebody in the chat's asking that, do we suggest that senior postdocs be able to apply for grants? Yes, we do. That doesn't mean that they're gonna get them, because they will be competing against, more well-established researchers. So yeah, we are advocating that the eligibility be changed and that postdocs should be able to apply. They can be, we're asking that they can apply as primary applicants on all different grants, but we also think that it helps to strengthen their track record if they have these opportunities to do independent research. It's a way of demonstrating that they can do independent research and manage funds. Otherwise, the granting agencies are sort of taking a chance on a postdoc that may not have as established a track record as other researchers that they are competing against. So we would like to improve a postdoc's chances as much as possible. So we're doing a multi-pronged approach here. We're asking for smaller grants so that and those would only be applied for by postdocs, and then to be able to compete in the broader competitions and see how they do there. So we're looking for all of those solutions. Any other questions? Are there any parts of this plan that people would like to see changed or adjusted, or any additions that people would like to see?
I think there is one comment in the chat window.
Do you mean from Clove?
Yeah.
I just addressed that one.
Okay.
Any other suggestions or feedback? How do people feel about this? Does this plan fit with what they're seeing at their institutions? Would that improve the situation people are facing right now with COVID and without COVID? Everybody must be thinking about it.
Can I make another point, Emma?
Can you make another point, or can I make another point?
Yeah. The other thing that I was just thinking about is the tax differences between the provinces in Canada. And when we ask about the having a livable wage for postdocs, whether we can come up with an equation that we can factor the tax of the provinces into the amount that we are asking as a livable wage for postdocs. What's your thoughts about that?
Right. I don't see those equations being something that we should generate. I think that we are more familiar with what's happening with postdocs on the ground, and so that we can bring the challenges to the Tri-Council, and they are, you know, they are smart people. They have more, they have a wider range of people with different skills that have been working on these issues for a number of years. So I think that we bring the challenges to the Tri-Council and work with them, and they can you know, finding the more fine-grained solutions to these issues, that would lie probably more appropriately with the Tri-Council. But we'd be very happy to work with them on something like that. Any other questions?
So I had a question, Emma. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering that if I have no clue if there is any connection between other granting agencies, which are more private, with the Tri-Council, and if so, or if not, I mean, if there is any thought about that from Tri-Council to, or like eventually thinking something like this, similar for those granting like the agency. So something like Kilon, something like those grants which are processing internally in the universities.
So I think the Tri-Council works with different companies to offer things like, I know there was a L'Oreal at one point. I think there was a L'Oreal. I don't think that was a fellowship. I think it was a PhD doctoral award. But I think they work with groups to be able to offer those. I'm not sure how much say they have in the distribution or the award level. And in terms of internal awards offered at institutions, I don't think that the Tri-Council has much influence on those. I think that, you know, the best course of action here is to concentrate on the fellowships that the Tri-Council does have sort of jurisdiction over. But I can see Catherine's on the line. I'm not sure. That can be something that we can ask. We can pose.
Yes, thank you.
So Clove is saying that we are maybe not talking about a living wage, but we're also talking about a fair and respectful, non-exploitative wage. So, yeah, those comments are fair, and thank you for making them. I do know that, you know, as a postdoc making $40,000 a year, if you got to pay rent and you've got to look after kids. I don't know that in different sections of the country. If you are interested in performing research in Vancouver, that $40,000 a year is not going to get you very far. So I don't know that, you know, you can say that that's a living wage. You can scrape by, and nobody's considering buying houses here. That's just to pay your rent and pay for food. So I think that we can call it making a living wage. The situations across the country are very different. Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, the cost of living is extremely high. And that's why we're saying we've got to better balance out the distribution of funds, what the postdoctoral awards are across different areas of the country. Adjunct instructors don't make a living wage. That's probably very fair to say. That's probably very fair. What are your thoughts about the new incoming international postdocs during this COVID-19 in terms of mandatory quarantine and the likes? I don't know that that's within the scope of today's discussion. I think as long as everybody is observing the Public Health Agency of Canada's recommendations, then, you know, the movement of people, whether they're international postdocs or whatnot, is fine. Any other questions? Okay, well, if there are, living wage should be the same for all workers in a region. I think it's a misuse of the concept to use it. Okay, all right, Clove, thank you for your comments. If you're interested in making some specific comments about the language in our draft, that would be really helpful. And we will definitely take what you're saying today and try to maybe rework how we're describing what we think is a living wage. Maybe we can change the language a little bit to reflect your comments. Any other questions, comments, concerns, feedback? Okay, well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. I think this has been a very informative discussion. As I said, the link for the draft will be made available, and we'd really appreciate people to comment, make as many comments as possible, especially postdoc associations and those involved in postdoc advocacy. And as I say, we'll keep you posted as to when we submit our final top 5 asks. And again, check your calendars for our AGM that's coming up in November, because we have a lot of exciting sessions planned for that as well. And stay tuned for other exciting PAW sessions that are happening the rest of this week. And don't forget to submit your stories of positivity and resilience to the competition. I think everyone probably at this point has a good chance of winning. And Christine says the AGM is November 5th. So thanks again to all of our great speakers today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.